So at Pilot, I'm always looking out for a really exciting story that's going to really excite our audiences. And our audiences in general are teenagers. And when I heard about this book, I just thought it sounded perfect for us. It's another wonderful coming-of-age story. It's set in the most magical location, which is the northeast of England, which also happens to be where I grew up, so I know about its special magic and its special power. It's by David Almond, who is just one of the most incredible living authors, and certainly one of the most incredible living authors writing for young people. And it was irresistible. And when I picked it up, I just found myself totally immersed immediately in this stunning world that is set now, but actually felt totally timeless to me. And it's about really that really pivotal year when you leave school effectively, if you've stayed to do A-levels. So that year of kind of being 17, just on the cusp of adulthood, where so much is coming at you and you might be thinking about leaving home for the first time. You're suddenly going to be legally an adult when you turn 18. We all go through that, and it's a really particular year, and it's about that time. So that was really potent. And it's the most amazing love story. And it's also about loss, and it's about a girl who dies tragically, and about how her best friend and wider group of friends come to terms with that loss. So it's a really universally relevant story, and it's perfect for pilots. So my initial ideas about staging the piece. First and foremost, I absolutely love that the book is called A Song for Ella Gray. And the first thing that captured my imagination was the potential use of music and sound. And if you've seen any of Pilot's work over the last 4 or 5 years, very often music and sound is important to us. It's something that gives immediate theatricality to a story. It's really magic. Nothing quite gives height to a story like adding music into it in some way. So that was going to be key and a really interesting, exciting challenge, first and foremost. As ever, I was excited by the proposition to work with a really exciting playwright. And Zoe Cooper was someone who I'd wanted to work with for a while. She happens to be based in Newcastle, and she's told stories like this before, and she's told them really, really beautifully. And I just thought this was the perfect match of a playwright to a text. So that was important. And other things are, the sound world. So not just the music, but the sound world, I thought was really, really exciting and rich. The locations in it are fantastic. There's lots of scenes on the beach. There's lots of scenes in the centre of Newcastle at some key Newcastle locations. And there's the underworld. Oh my goodness. I mean, the excitement of the opportunity to put the underworld on stage. All of that just felt really rich and really full of opportunity for a mid-scale production. So the Orpheus myth is just one of the greatest stories, and it's about, for me, there's so many different ways to interpret the Orpheus myth, but what I think is really potent about it in relation to this story is, in a sense, it's about a character who does something that's basically impossible, or goes on a quest that's absolutely extraordinary. They go on a quest where they go into an underworld in order to reconnect with someone who's died, who they love, and they try to bring them back from the dead. And that's like such a kind of magical, extraordinary, impossible thing to do. And the way the myth works is it's so well crafted because, of course, what's inevitable is that, and we kind of know this when we hear the story. That's why this story is so potent. Is we know that that's not possible. So what happens in the myth is there's a kind of pact made with death, which is that, of course, you can bring Eurydice back, but you have to not turn back. So if they say something to you or if they touch you, you must not turn and look at them. Otherwise, there's no way that they can make that step from the world of death into the world of living again. It seems like a really simple thing to do, right? You're like, oh yeah, of course, I'm not going to turn back. But of course, what's inevitable is that Orpheus is going to turn back. It just has to happen because, of course, we can't bring people back from the dead. It's a sad, devastating fact, but it is a fact. And so the myth's about that, really. And I think what that represents is how we all have to accept, really, our mortality. It's as simple as that. It's something that we all have to come to accept. And that is part of, in a sense, human existence, and certainly part of being an adult. So I think being situated in this story, what we're telling is a story, as I've said, about growing up, in a sense, about passing from the portal of childhood to adulthood, which is also an inevitable rite of passage, unless, of course, you tragically die. But it's inevitable that we're going to go from one place to the next. So in addition, Orpheus, to me, is almost like a liminal space between childhood and adulthood. And I think that's the kind of the togetherness of those two themes is very, very important in the story. But another thing I want to highlight is that in our adaptation, it's actually Eurydice who has a really driving role. And you might not kind of realise that at first, but I think what's really beautiful about the story is that it's Eurydice who actually leads her friends who are going to play Orpheus in the story. But she's the one who leads her friends to a place of acceptance that she's died. So unlike the original myth, where Eurydice is actually a quite silent figure, it doesn't really say very much. What's nice about this story is Eurydice is has more agency, in a sense, and I think that's really interesting and part of how we're representing the myth now in 2024 on stage. So the themes are, first of all, youth is a theme, and being young is a really important, significant theme. And going from childhood to adulthood, passing through that portal of being an early to mid-teenager into adulthood, and all the things that come along with that, all the kind of extra pressures that might come along with that for a young person. The play is full of that and full of reflections on that. And the young people, in a sense, react against some of the pressures that are coming at them, and that's why they go on this fantastic adventure. So that's a really important theme, first and foremost. Love and friendship are really important themes. The story is in a sense about a girl who's in love with her best friend, and must come to terms with their loss. But there's a huge friendship network too around the two girls, and it's about that theme of how we stand together in a sense in a moment of a crisis, which is when we might lose someone, for example. So the themes of love and friendship are very rich and very potent throughout the whole of the story. So another theme is, in a sense, the environment and nature. That's really potent in the whole of the story. And there's lots of absolutely beautiful descriptions of the northeast landscapes, which are, if you don't know them, utterly stunningly beautiful places, magical, almost mythical. And David Almond, I think, has written a real love letter to the landscapes of the northeast, and Zoe's taken that on really beautifully in the adaptation. And the environment more broadly, I mean, clearly we're in a moment of climate crisis, and another theme is loss. And I think there is bubbling through the story, in a sense, a theme of eco-grief in that sense. One of the characters is a really obsessive bird watcher and really kind of interested in nature as well. So it's something that the kids are really thinking about, and they want, they're in nature, they go camping and they spend a lot of time outdoors, and Orpheus is a figure that represents nature too, and you'll see in the production that connection really potently. And as I was saying, loss and grief are themes. I think we're still in an interesting moment historically. It's not that long since lockdowns and the pandemic, and it feels as though our country's going through a period of change, and a lot of us are processing loss in different ways, real loss of people from COVID and from its kind of repercussions. So I think especially for a younger age group as well, who might not have had the chance to really think about this and process this period of time, the fact the stories about loss is very rich in that way too. I've commissioned a writer, and we start really with this beautiful text. So in a sense, character work starts with the text, and there's some really simple exercises which are, what do we know about the characters? What are the facts? And we kind of gather those. And also a really good question to ask is, what can we guess at? So what's implied? What do other characters say about the character? So often we start very simply with a process of just gathering all of that information, because that gives you quite a rounded sense of a character, both who they think they are themselves, what other people say about them, and other facts and information that there might be about them in the script. So that gives you a kind of bedrock to work from. I really love tools like improvisation. So we often do improvisations. They might include things like hot seating, but they might also include physical improvisations as well. If you've seen our work, you'll know that the physical dimensions of our work are important, and it's really important that actors, as well as intellectually understanding a character, start to explore embodying them. So, what is this character's body like? How do they move? Literally, what might the kind of anatomy of the character feel like? Are they a very fast character or a slower character? There's all sorts of different fun things we explore on the floor through improvisation in the body as well. Once we've got the bedrock of understanding the nuts and bolts of the character from what we can gather from the text, we've already done some beautiful work in workshops. We all went up to Bamborough Beach. So there's also something about embodying a character actually in the landscapes, if you can do it. And this is a gift, this project, for being able to do that. So we've been to Bamborough Beach, and we've been in the sea, and we've been running up the dunes and thinking about how each of our characters responds to this mystical character of Orpheus. And we were really lucky to go to Bamborough Beach on a really gorgeous sunny day, where the light was extraordinary, the shadows were really long. We got those beautiful reflections that you get in the water on the beach. So in a sense, we did some improvisations actually in situ, which was really potent, and we shared some reflections together. So the style of this production, I think it's very lyrical, and it's a play with music. It has a kind of symbolic feeling to it, I think, where we really are leaning into the feeling of theatre as a ritual, as a great place where we can gather to hear a story. Storytelling is important, and there's a lot of direct audience address as well in this play. So I would say it's not naturalism, although there are moments that do feel more natural and real. These are all, in a sense, framed through this beautiful narration that Zoe's written. And one of the reasons for that is that the story, in a sense, is a memory play. So it's about young people. They're still young, but they're looking back on the events from being, at college or at university. So they're in the very late teens, or even maybe early 20s when they look back at these events of being 17 or 18. So that narration and that direct audience address gives that slight distancing effect, but also enables us to step into this gorgeous symbolic storytelling. The Northeast is such a magical, important place, and the first place we represent, in a sense, the landscape and the spirit of the region is in the language and in the text and in the way that the text is written and its rhythms. And we have cast Northerners entirely, and mostly those who have grown up and are very, very familiar with this area. So their voices, in a sense, breathe with the landscape, I would say. That's really, really key. Also, the music and the sound really breathe with this as well. So this is even before we get into a visual realm. The kind of aural qualities of the production really breathe with this authenticity of the Northeast, and is a kind of honouring of the region as well, and a celebration of it. And then, magic will be made with visuals too. So there's something about the light in the Northeast that's very particular to me. I suppose as someone who spent a lot of time there and grew up there, that it has a kind of magical quality. So light will be important. We are planning to use some projection in the show as well, but I think that what we'll try and do most of the time is use fairly abstract images. That doesn't mean you may still see things like the sea, actually, but what we're trying to do really is create the feeling of the place and honour the feeling of the place, rather than try and create a filmic representation, because of course we're in the theatre and you can use your imagination so beautifully with us just giving you a few keys and clues. And if you know our work, you know that we do prefer that quite stripped back storytelling approach, which is honouring your imagination so that you can create those visuals in your own mind, in a sense.